my role here as the head of culture in Lund is it consists of like different ingredients. So I would say, like, formally, I am the manager of an organization, an organization that do stuff. So, like, we have Lund's Konsthall, art exhibition hall. We have the Kulturskolan, the culture school. We educate children in culture. We have 3,465 students coming in every day of the week, taking classes in different kind of subjects, and there's a lot of, like, that's administration. So I have managers under me and they have staff under them, and there's like 150 people that every day come to work and things that have to work. So I mean, that's the formal part of the role. And then there's also the role of being some kind of driving force in the intersection between, like, culture, policy, and the rest of the city, developing the city, trying to, like, get the culture part into that. That might be the more exciting part of my work and the more interesting and sometimes challenging, but it's also the part that is, like, harder to describe sometimes, because there's no formal structure for that. That's a constant balance and improvisation of how do you do this actually. And I think that description also kind of fits in when you want to try to frame what is the city, the municipality, what's our role in working with culture, specific but being kind of visionary, saying something about what we want. We have our specific target groups. It's important to work with culture for young people. It's important to work inclusive. It's important to make it possible to live as a cultural creator in the city. All these kind of things that most cities would say. I am proud of our cultural program though, because it's not that generic. It's a culture program that couldn't be any city in Sweden. It can only be Lund. I think there are parts in it that is quite radical and quite challenging for the mind, which I think is important in a cultural program. So I hope you have time to read it sometimes. So that's like the formal part. We do stuff, and then there's the other part that is what's happening inside the culture, the content, the things happening on these arenas. I mean, we can build a stage, and we can make it possible for people to be on that stage and do certain things, some kind of performing arts. But what we don't do and what we shouldn't do as a city is influencing exactly what are they going to say, what are the thoughts and ideas that will be spread out and performed and from that stage. But we are always, I mean, you can talk, you can say that the culture should be free, but that's just something we cover behind, because we're always involved in it in some kind of policy making, and who do we give the funds to and who do we not give the funds to, and what are how do we spread this, how do we create the system, the cultural infrastructure, and there's so much power in that. And talking about power in a structure of culture is kind of scary, and it's kind of taboo, and sometimes it's something that you are not supposed to do. But we have a lot of power. I mean, I have a lot of power in Lund, in the culture part. You have definitely a lot of power. Your power is formal. You are elected to get that kind of power. My power is in another way, because I am employed to do certain things, and I'm employed to do the things that you decide in the board. But then there's also a huge freedom and quite a large area where I can navigate and use my freedom as long as I don't overstep some kind of boundaries. And all these things are quite interesting, because that means that we need to navigate in a field with all the people and all the organizations and all the actors in the city that are a part of the cultural system, and together try to navigate and find paths to develop and create what is the entity that becomes the cultural ecosystem of a city. I've been using this a little bit for fun, but also a lot of serious thought behind it in lots of different forums in the city. I've been speaking about the poet norm as a norm in city planning. I said, we need the poet norm. No one in Lund should have to live more than 300 meters away from a poet. And everyone was like, how could you do that? how can you plot that on a map? And I was like, of course we can't. I mean, we can't make rules for where the poets should live. And maybe if there's a lot of poets in this part of the area, it would be a problem. We need to plot them out of the city. So, I mean, we could never have a poet norm like that. But we could create a city where it's possible for a poet to live anywhere, and where it's likely that no one lives more than 300 meters away from a poet, because in that kind of city, it will be a better city for everyone. And no one should live more than 300 meters from an artist, or from a musician, or from a whatever. But it is a way of getting people aware that you actually need to do things, because this is not something that happens automatically. If you just keep planning the cities the way you always plan cities, there will not be poets in every place, and you will not live up to the poet norm. But if you do things aware and try to actually form a city around something like it, because we have a lot of other norms. We have a green norm saying how far away from a tree can you live. We have a blue norm saying how far away from water can you live. We have a parking norm saying how many parking spaces does have to be to every. I mean, we have a lot of these norms, but we don't have those for cultural values, and I think we need to do that. So I keep repeating this, and now people are actually coming to us and asking, well, we're building this new neighborhood here. How can we do this?
Not owning all the buildings and all the activities yourself, but having to facilitate opportunities or understanding complexity in a way, and trying to navigate that complexity. So talking about complexity, I mean, this is the Cambridge. For those of you who might not know, this is the Cambridge or the Oxford of Sweden. So it's a very large university in a city of what, 105,000? 130,000. So and the university is about 45,000 students. So it's a very large institution. It's very central for everybody else's perception of Lund. Is it's the university, and then it's the cathedral. And then of course there are lots of assumptions about what the city is, but for somebody who's living and working in this area, it's much more than that, because it's also this dynamo that attracts people and pulses people away towards Malmö, towards Landskrona, towards all the other municipalities in this part of the region. And I'm thinking about if you look into, for instance, the composition of your citizens, can you see a change there that will challenge cultural policy and the need of cultural investment and cultural infrastructure over the next 5-10 years?
Most certainly. I mean, we are in as rest of the country in a big demographic change. There's not enough children is born, and the older now that is with the focus of what is happening next, as Mårthen is saying. I think that we're going back to what I think Lund was before, that the culture was a very normal part of the city development, of how the city was growing, and it hasn't been for a while. I think that we haven't seen, or the persons who's working with and the politicians who's working with the city planning have just been so into, okay, how many apartments can we build there? How much of the land can we exploit to make sure that we can build so many houses as possible, so many new places for people to work in, that we have missed what is it that makes Lund? What is it that makes Lund attractive? And we know that it's not, I mean, a place to live. If I just would like that, I could have lived in Eslöv or Burlöv or in any other city or municipality close by. But what gives Lund the edge is the cultural life that is very broad in Lund, which is a strength. but also that it's the step to be a part of it is very, very short, which is also important, that you can try, and you can try. I mean, we have organizations for everything, and if you whatever you want to try, you can find an organization and look where you can try that, which is something that we need to take care of and make sure that could also extend and be a part of the future, and being with that perspective in the city planning in a much stronger way. I think that makes sure that the culture have a central place in the development of the city. We could also see that bigger corporations in Lund are very interested in being with us to create. We have created a certain or a specific network that is called Lund, where we as a city, together with companies, where the companies pay a certain amount of money to get in that network, and we pay as much for every company that goes in. And that is a platform to support that it happens, fun things in Lund. Everything from big cultural events to making sure that we had the UEFA under-17 women's European Championship in football last year. So it has been abroad, but that also shows that there is interest from not only the public side of Lund to be a part of making sure that things happen, because there is a value to it. And it's also, I mean, we have a place called Stenkrossen in the south of Lund, where it was supposed to not be a Stenkross and a cultural house after a while. That didn't work out as the people in Byggnadsnämnd, I have not a clue what that's its name in English, wanted, because the culture and what was happening at Stenkrossen was so strong. And you could also see that the building actors that started to build houses around Stenkrossen used Stenkrossen to say, this is a place where we have culture, they use that in their marketing to be able to sell their apartments. And it took a while for our city planning officials to understand that, okay, we can't just push that away, push that somewhere else. So I think that is one part of it. And the other part that we're trying to do is to not only maintain, but also strengthening the independency of the cultural sector in Lund, that we as politicians try to take a step backwards in the details and saying, well, we would like this piece of art, not this piece of art. And that's not because I don't trust myself, but I think it's both an important principle to make sure, but also when we see what happens, not only I mean, of course, it's easy to see what Trump and his friends are doing in the US, but I mean, we see the same thing in municipalities in Sweden. We had a debate last year that Region Skåne banned arts from
offices.
What?
Offices.
Yeah, in offices and public spaces. There we had a doctor that had his own arts that he was owning, very nice arts. But there were some politicians who really didn't like that, because so they abandoned it. So I mean, it's also very close. So we need to make sure that even if I really hope that me and my friends get re-elected and can keep being the steering force in the city of Lund, we also need to make sure that those values doesn't stay at risk if we don't. So I think that's also an important part of what we're trying to do for the long term. No one will vote for me because we do that, but I think that it's important to make sure that we have those checks and balances systems that so it at least is harder to go rogue as a politician. All that are in the age of 25, 35, because right now we are losing, and we have been for quite a while. After you are done with your studies, you you have the bad idea of moving to Malmö, for example, and then you come back when you have getting your children because they say, oh, the schools in Lund, they're quite good. Let's go back. This is a good place to raise a child. And that is challenging for a city because I mean, to be from a city perspective a bit egoistic. I mean, it's this is where the tax money is in those people that are haven't started their family. They are healthy. They are out and about a lot, and they work. And they don't cost the city anything. But when they get, as I have gotten children, and we start to cost the citizens or the city money again. And so from a city perspective, we need those people, not only because it's fun and it make a more vibrant city, but it's also a part of how we should or we could tackle the demographic change. And I think that when we work with that group, we need to be more offensive on the culture side. I mean, that's what we have. That's one of the reasons why we have dropped, or why we're dropping citizens to Malmö, because a part of the more professional cultural life here, and especially when it's the more cultural companies have moved from Lund to Malmö, and that challenges why should I live in Lund when we have that in Malmö, and then you can go back to Lund when you want to visit. And so I think that we need to work with it also from a point of view where, okay, how do we get those people to stay, and how can we attract companies? How can we make sure that when bigger companies look at Sweden and say we want to invest, we want them to invest here because we can give them or attract them with something that no one else can. So we need to be better on that to be more attractive as a city. If we don't only want to be a city with families, students, and very old people.
I think also, I mean, I spend a lot of time fighting nostalgia.
We've done it before, but now we talk a lot about, okay, when we're going to invest in public areas, like one of the bigger squares, and we say that, okay, this is supposed to be the event square in Lund. That cannot only be a flat area where you can move. You put aside the cars when it's supposed to be an event. How do we make it easier to make the event there, to lower the costs, to actually do the event? And I think that's important because we had, speaking of nice sketches, we opened, it was a couple of years ago, a new outdoor amphitheater in St. Hans Backa, it's in north of Lund. And we had a very, very proud colleague to Mårthen in another department of the city who said, oh, this is going to be so great, this is where it's going to be so many nice things here, it's going to be culture. And then the journalist asked, okay, what is going to happen first? He said, I don't know. Because, and now when we are there, when we are there and trying to do things, we need to add so much stuff because it's not built for being what it's supposed to do. It looks very nice, but it's very hard to do in a concert there or do it. So it's hard to use, and we need to make it easier and have that perspective when we have the city planning, and also make sure that instead of coming up with all those things afterwards, we discuss it on forehand. And I think that we have moved that perspective in the last couple of years to actually be there and be a part of it from the beginning, and also and that's not only to make it easier to perform, but also to make how do we do this square safe enough when we have an event from the beginning, so that we can have bigger crowds here, to have all that perspective from the beginning. I think it's important, but it's also a long-term investment of making sure that we can use our public spaces for culture. And I think that is a perspective that we have added.
Both the cultural political side, but also from a social side, a social design side. And a number of reports have come out in Denmark, for instance, that we're losing the men, that the gender category that is kind of dropping out of culture are males 50 plus. And the numbers are increasing, which is in some parts of the country, not in every part of the country, but in some parts of the country. So it's interesting to see, is the composition in Lund different? And then, of course, raise the question, why is it then different? And what is actually being done that could be reflected on as a strategy, also when it comes to younger men, for instance? Is there, so that was the reason why. But you might, Natalie, please.
Yes, thank you so much. Really, also so many thoughts and questions, and I don't know where to start or how to start. But probably I'll pick up on the nostalgia dimension and kind of ask you to talk a little bit more maybe about the future and future thinking and your imagination that you touched upon, Mårthen, in the beginning, that of course your outlook is towards to see how Lund will be in 25, 30 years from now. And from that perspective, I was wondering, how are you thinking of collaborating with the different departments to, if we are supposed to be in the same structural institutional setup in 30 years from now, how would you better collaborate maybe with the other departments within the city so that you are not faced all the time with those wonderful sketches that actually has no reality behind that, and how to make sure that culture is part of these conversations from the very beginning, and we are not only called in to solve the problems while once you need to have your first performance in this performance square where nothing works, etc. And it's not only necessarily from the infrastructural perspective that my question comes in, but also from the socio-structural, if you may. So how to make sure that also this dimension of culture, of artists, of trusting them, of bringing them into conversation, of asking them those questions also that are important for the wider city imagination for the future. So how would you, how would that, could that work in an imaginary, idealistic, but also hopefully on a more realistic level?
I think that there needs to be a pressure from the outside to actually create real change. I think like one thing that happened, I think last year or something, was that all the directors and the political leadership of the city, they invited a lot of different companies, like the big employers in the city were invited to workshop, talking about like what do you need to attract more working force or more people getting to come to Lund to work. And one of the things that a lot of these companies mentioned was that we need a vibrant cultural life. That's what we need. We want to attract, if we want to attract people, if we want to attract people to work, move here, not to just work here, living in Malmö or Copenhagen or somewhere else. If they want to move here, we need a vibrant cultural life. We need working structures for leisure and for sports and for taking care of the kids and everything like that. And just hearing that for some of those people in charge in different kind of areas of the city, that is very important. That is pressure from the outside saying, okay, this is something we need to do to survive, to stay attractive, whatever. Not just because it's beautiful or because it's something you should have in a policy document or in a cultural plan. Because you can add numbers to it and say, okay, this is important for us to get in the taxes, to get in the funding, to actually keep existing. And I can see that only after that workshop we started getting invitations to places where we hadn't been before. So maybe that kind of like, and that also, I mean, that means we also need, Lund is very, I mean, we are a university city, so if we can put research behind it, if we can use Katja or her colleagues as well, like pushing out reports saying, if you do this, this will happen, that really means something. That really opens those doors. And then we can be ready with all the things that we know, how to work with artistic processes and how to involve an artist and how to do that for real, because those things, we know them, we know how to do it, we just need to be invited.
Asbjørn, was that a question to that?
Yeah. I mean, asking the companies what they need to attract employees is very obvious to do so, but the answer, a vibrant cultural city, is quite an open answer. I'd say
We need to interpret it.
we need to kind of dive into what is that. And I'm curious just to know, have you asked the audiences? You've been very focused on the artists and the organizations and all the deliverables they get out of it. But what about the people of Lund? And it's both those who already uses the cultural institutions, but what about the non-users? They're very important to ask. If you want to deliver a vibrant cultural life, it needs to meet the needs of people who live here, not necessary, but also, of course, the future citizens of Lund. But have you made a strategy or a plan how to actually find out what motivates the citizens of Lund as cultural users? And in a broad perspective, but it's easy to ask, go to a museum, ask the visitors there, but they're already users and they chose the museum for a reason. But there's a lot of people who never goes there.
We do that sometimes in different forms, sometimes through interviews, sometimes in like service or things like that, and there are a lot of service. But I think it's very important to work actively with the people who are creating culture, both on professional and non-professional levels, and let them both explore and develop, but also do that kind of audience work, because in a very specific way you can apply like market theory even on this. I mean, if the producers are also consumers, and the producers, they have the contact with the consumers, and in some extent they will not keep producing something that no one wants. And if people are asking for something but no one is producing it, you can't get it anyway. So you need to make sure that there is a vibrant cultural life, professional and non-professional, and that you have an education system, and that you have places to create, develop and perform culture, because if you don't have that, there's nothing to wish for.